Welcome back to another episode of Draped in Dread. Today's case, just as a little bit of a trigger warning, is a little more on the disturbing side. So if you would prefer to not hear about torture, I would skip this episode. It's not very graphic, but it is, disturbing. So the main people in this case are all teenagers, and they are named Melinda Lovelace, Tony Lawrence, Lori Hackett, Hope Rippey, and Shanda Sharer. The case primarily takes place in southern Indiana around the New Albany and Madison area. It kind of escalates, but it starts in 1990 and the crime occurs in January of 1992. So the case really kind of begins in 1990 when 15-year-old Melinda Lovelace began dating a 13-year-old named Amanda Heverin. She had kind of a troubled home life. Her father had left the family and her mother had just gotten remarried. And right around that time, she started kind of acting out, getting into fights and being depressed. And it even went as far as she had to start getting professional counseling. And in March of 1991, Melinda came out to her mom as a lesbian, which her two older sisters had done as well. And her mother was furious, but over time began accepting it. But ironically enough, as the year progressed and her mother accepted it, Melinda's relationship with Amanda was deteriorating and breaking down. It's a little complicated because a few of them went to the same school, but overall they all kind of met in various ways. So I'm going to try to give like a little bit of a breakdown. Shanda Sharer moved to New Albany when she was 12 and was attending Hazelwood Middle School. Melinda Lovelace was 15 and had previously attended New Albany High School but had dropped out. Lori Hackett was from Madison, Indiana and had went to Madison Consolidated High School but had also dropped out. Hope Rippey and Tony Lawrence were from the Madison area as well, and Hope was enrolled in Madison Consolidated High School, but Tony had dropped out. So a lot of them knew each other from school, but most of them were not still going to school. And at this point, Melinda Lovelace and Shanda Sharer do not know each other at all. So this is where it kind of starts to get a little bit messy. But in 1990, 15-year-old Melinda began dating a 13-year-old named Amanda Heverin. Melinda's father had just left the family and her mother had just gotten remarried, and she had begun acting increasingly erratic. She was getting into fights and she ended up receiving professional counseling. In March of 1991, Melinda came out to her mother as a lesbian, which interestingly enough, her two older sisters were as well. And her mother was furious but slowly accepted it. But ironically and unfortunately, as the year progressed, Melinda's relationship with Amanda was rapidly deteriorating. So meanwhile, as their relationship is deteriorating, Amanda met Shanda Sharer early in the fall of 1991 at Hazelwood Middle School when Amanda got into a fight with Shanda. However, they became friends while in detention for the fight and later started writing each other and passing notes in school. Melinda did not like this and immediately started getting jealous of Amanda and Shanda's close friendship. And in October of 1991, Amanda took Shanda as her date to a school dance. Which Melinda found out and showed up to confront Shanda. And although Amanda and Melinda never had actually or officially broken up, Melinda started dating an older girl, which, I'm not sure I see the issue with that part because, it sounds like Amanda was dating also. I mean, if you're taking another girl to the dance, like, that sounds pretty done to me. And then in late October, Melinda found out that Amanda and Shanda had attended a festival together, and she started threatening her in public and talking to people about killing her, which, again, I don't condone murder, but, like, people really need to stop running around just openly and publicly talking about their murder plans. It's like, shh. Like, don't kill people, but also just keep your mouth shut. Like, stop. I don't understand this running around telling people you're going to kill somebody thing. Like, don't do that. But anyway, Shanda's parents did not like the effect that they felt that they were beginning to see on their daughter after she had started hanging out so much with Amanda. So they arranged for her to be transferred to a Catholic school in late November of 1991, which, that's never going to help. I'm so sorry, but, like, a Catholic school? No. The strict stuff? No. That's going to make it worse. It's going to make her rebel more, but whatever. So Amanda then later claimed that she gave letters that Melinda had sent her containing the death threats about Shanda to a, quote, youth prosecutor. I don't really know what they mean by that. One thing I saw said they were referencing kind of like one of those, like, school cops, school security officers. I saw a couple of mixed sources on what a youth prosecutor is. So yeah. But apparently the youth prosecutor never did anything about it, which that is so often the case in these situations. It's like that somebody knew, somebody of authority knew, and wrote stuff off, and then someone gets murdered. So the events of January 10th and the 11th of 1992, right before the crime. So on the night of January 10th, 1992, Tony, who was then 15, Hope, who was 15, and Lori, who was 17, drove in Lori's car from Madison to Melinda's house in New Albany, which is about an hour drive, so not that crazy. Hope and Tony, while both friends of Lori, had not previously met Melinda, who was then 16. And upon arrival, they borrowed some clothes, as teenage girls do, and apparently Melinda pulled out a knife and started showing it to them and telling them that she had decided she was going to scare Shanda with it. And while Lori, Hope, and Tony had never met Shanda prior to this night, Lori already knew of the plan to murder the 12-year-old, which is crazy because the amount of people in these stories that know someone's going to get murdered and say nothing is just crazy. Because if I was I don't care if I was 15 or whatever, like, if I'm hanging out with people and they're like, hey, we're going to kill this person, I'd be like, I have to go, like, bye. Have a nice evening, I'm calling the police. Anyway, Melinda started filling them in kind of on the drama and explained to them that she hated Shanda for being a, quote, copycat and for stealing her girlfriend. So, again, in Lori's car, with Hope driving this time, they drive to Jeffersonville, which is where Shanda stayed with her father on the weekends, and they stopped at a McDonald's to ask for directions, and arrived at Shanda's house shortly before dark. Melinda then ordered Hope and Tony to go to the door and tell her father that they were friends of Amanda's. But instead of Shanda's father answering, Shanda herself answered. And Hope and Tony asked for Shanda because they'd never seen her before. And then she was like, I am Shanda, basically. And then Hope and Tony asked her to come with them to go see Amanda, who was supposedly waiting for them at, quote, the Witch's Castle, or Mistletoe Falls, which was a ruined stone house that was located on a hill overlooking the Ohio River. Shanda did not want to go. She told them she had a party she was supposed to be going to and asked if they could come back around midnight, which was a few hours later. Melinda was angry at first when they got back in the car and told her, but Hope and Tony assured her about returning later. So then the four girls crossed the river into Louisville and went to a punk rock show by the band Sunspring near Interstate 65. Tony and Hope quickly lost interest in the music and went to the parking lot outside. After the show, they all got back into Lori's car and headed back to Shanda's house across the river, back into Jeffersonville. During the ride, Melinda said that she could not wait to kill Shanda, which, gross. However, Melinda also said she just intended to use the knife to frighten her, which doesn't add up, babe, but okay. When they arrived at Shanda's house at 12:30 a.m., Tony refused to go up there and get Shanda, so Lori went up there with Hope to the door instead. Melinda hid under a blanket in the back seat of the car with the knife, because remember, because prior to all this drama with Amanda, Melinda and Shanda did not know each other, but now that they do and they have like open beef, basically, like Shanda would have been like, why is she in the back seat? Like, what's going on? So Shanda's father and stepmother had already gone to bed and allowed Shanda to just stay up to watch TV. So Hope told Shanda that Amanda was still waiting for them at the witch's castle. Shanda was still reluctant to go, but she did agree ultimately. And as they got in the car, Hope began to ask Shanda questions about her relationship with Amanda. And then Melinda sprang out of the back seat and held the knife to Shanda's throat and was interrogating her aggressively about her relationship with Amanda. And as they drove towards Utica and the witch's castle, Lori told the girls there was a local legend that said the house was once a castle that was owned by 9 witches and that the townspeople burned down the house to get rid of the witches, which only left a small stone in its place. So she was like basically trying to make sure Shanda wanted to go. So she was like giving him like this urban legend and making it sound all interesting. I think it kind of backfired though, because apparently it like scared Shanda and she started crying. Because again, she's 12. She's like a lot younger than the other ones. And it's after midnight and they're taking her to this like witch's castle in the middle of nowhere. So she started crying and asking to go home. And apparently Melinda started like taunting her and got out a rope. And with the knife still like being held to her throat, she bound her arms and legs. She started continued taunting her, saying that she had pretty hair and wondered how pretty Shanda would actually look though if they cut her hair off. Which, psychopathic behavior. Melinda began taking off Shanda's rings and handing them to the other girls. And at some point, Hope took Shanda's Mickey Mouse watch and danced to the tune it was playing, which again, like all of this stuff, like I don't care that these are like 15, 17-year-olds and stuff. This is a 12-year-old and doing this stuff while they're torturing her is crazy. Again, though, like I get the other girls supposedly, okay, I think they said Lori knew, but the rest of the girls did not know that she was actually going to kill her. But still, and I mean, like, Lori knows, so like what the fuck is your excuse? Like, what are you doing? So Lori then started taunting Shanda as well, claiming that the witch's castle was filled with human remains and that Shanda's would be left there as well. So again, this is a 12-year-old that's being like bound with rope in the back seat and has a knife held to her throat, and now they're like, oh, we're gonna kill you and leave your body here. And then to further frighten her, Lori retrieved a shirt that had a smiley face on it. Unclear of whose shirt this is or where it came from, but she lit it on fire, but then immediately got scared, like that the fire would be seen by passing cars, so she put it out. So after taking her to this abandoned so-called witch's castle, there was nothing there. It was just a stone. So they got back in the car and started driving, while Shanda was begging to go home. They became lost, so they stopped at a gas station and covered Shanda with a blanket because, again, she's still bound with ropes. Lori went inside to ask her directions, and this is weird a little bit, but Tony called a boy that she knew in Louisville and chatted casually for several minutes, but didn't mention Shanda's abduction or that she was tied up in the back seat or anything. She was just like having a casual convo, which is weird. They all got back in the car and started driving again and became lost again because apparently these girls are not Lewis and Clark, because they have gotten lost every time they've all been driving. So they went to another gas station to try to get more directions, because why not? And then while they were there, Tony and Hope spotted some boys and started talking to them, which is like, okay, you guys literally have someone tied up in the back seat, but yeah, let's go talk to boys. They then get back in the car and they arrived at the edge of woods, which was near Lori's home in Madison. So they're back in Madison at this point. And Lori said that she knows like an abandoned building off of a logging road in a super dense area, like densely forested area. So Tony and Hope were scared and decided to stay in the car, probably because there were no boys outside. Melinda and Lori made Shanda strip down to her underwear, and then Melinda began beating Shanda with her fists. Melinda repeatedly slammed Shanda's face into her knee, which cut Shanda's mouth on her own braces. Melinda tried to slash Shanda's throat, but the knife was too dull, which is absolutely horrific. Like, the knife was too dull, so she was trying to slit her throat, but she could not. And then here's the part that really is like extra whatever, because just a minute ago, as I mentioned, supposedly Tony and Hope were frightened and couldn't get out of the car. But then Hope sees her trying to slit her throat and decides to get out of the car and holds Shanda down. So suddenly she's not too scared to do this, you know. So she's holding Shanda down, who, by the way, has just been beaten in the face and is still bound and is 12, and they're trying to slit her throat with a dull knife. Melinda and Lori then began taking turns stabbing her in the chest. And then they strangled her with another piece of rope until she was unconscious, put her in the trunk of the car, and told the other girls that she was dead. Spoiler, she was not dead. So then the girls drive to Lori's house, which again is very close by, and they go inside to just have some chill time, you know. They just get some soda and shower and just super casual, like, you know, who doesn't need a soda after, you know, doing horrific acts outside. And then from inside the house, interrupting their soda break or whatever, they heard Shanda screaming in the trunk, so for them to be inside of a house and the girl's in the trunk and she's screaming so loudly they can hear her from inside. And Lori goes outside with another knife and stabbed her several more times. Coming back in a few minutes later with more blood, so I'm assuming she's going to have more soda and shower. So then after she washes herself off again, Lori told the girls that she wanted to do fortune telling with them. So she told them all their futures, which, what? Like, the timeline of events in this is just weird and concerning. Because, again, Lori's the oldest. She is 17. She's almost legally an adult. So, at 2:30 a.m., after their eventful night of soda breaks and fortune-telling, Lori and Melinda decide to go, quote, country cruising with what they think is a dead girl in their trunk. And Tony and Hope decided to stay behind at Lori's house because I guess they'd had enough fun for the night. And so Lori and Melinda, in their, quote, country cruising, went to the nearby town of Canaan. And on the way there, Shanda continued to make crying and gurgling noises. So Lori stopped the car. And when they opened the trunk, Shanda sat up and covered in blood and was unable to speak. So then Lori beat her with a tire iron until she was silent and claimed that while she did it, she was hitting her so hard that she actually felt Shanda's head cave in, and then told Melinda to, quote, smell it. So that's disgusting and weird, and honestly, Lori is the one who knew about this prior. The other girls thought they were just frightening her, supposedly. And honestly, Lori's behavior, considering she didn't even have a stake in this, like it wasn't even her girlfriend, she seems worse than Melinda, honestly. And again, she's the oldest, so, like, Shanda's only 12 and Lori is 17. It's kind of crazy. They then sexually assault Shanda with the same tire iron that they had just beaten her head with. And apparently the tire iron assault continued off and on for hours as they would get back in the car, start driving, decide to stop, open the trunk, beat her, and assault her, and then get back in the trunk. So this went on for literally hours because, again, this started at like 12, like midnight. And at this point, I think it's, 3, 4, 5 a.m., somewhere in there. So then, having had enough weird, disgusting country cruising or whatever, Melinda and Lori returned back to Lori's house just before daybreak to take a shower again, probably have more soda, and then they woke up the other two girls. Hope asked what happened to Shanda, and Lori laughingly described the torture. The conversation woke up Lori's mother, who was initially angry with her daughter being out so late, but then asked if the girls wanted breakfast. So I'm assuming that, she didn't actually hear what was being said. She just could hear loud talking and her daughter laughing, which is, again, gross. So Lori declined and said that she needed to take the other girls home. But instead, Lori drove to a burn pile where they opened the trunk to look at Shanda. They all wanted the other girls to look. So, Tony and Melinda wanted the other girls to look. And Tony refused. But Hope sprayed Shanda with Windex and taunted, quote, "You're not looking so hot now, are you?" Which, again, y'all are foul. So they then shut the trunk, drove to a gas station, pumped gasoline into the car, and bought a 2-liter of Pepsi. Lori then poured out the Pepsi at the gas station and filled the bottle with gasoline. They then drove north of Madison to Lemon Road off of U.S. Route 421, which was a place Hope knew of. Tony remained in the car while Lori and Hope wrapped Shanda, who was still alive, by the way, in a blanket and carried her to a field. Hope poured gasoline on Shanda, and then they set her on fire. Melinda was not convinced that Shanda was dead, so they returned minutes later to pour the rest of the gas and light more fire. So then after all of this super eventful night and morning, they then decided they were hungry. So they went to McDonald's at 9:30 a.m. to get breakfast, where all of them supposedly laughed about Shanda's badly burned body looking like one of the sausages that they were eating. So Tony, who I think is the only one that may have had any kind of conscience here, because she was the one who wouldn't look and didn't participate as much, she then goes to call a friend and just immediately spills her guts about what they just did. So after breakfast, Lori then drops off Tony and Hope at their respective homes and finally goes back to her own house, still with Melinda. And while there, Melinda calls Amanda and tells her that they killed Shanda and arranged to pick up Amanda later that day with Lori. Which, I don't know much about this Amanda girl, the Amanda Heverin. But, like, if someone called me and was like, hey, I just killed your girlfriend, we're going to come pick you up later, I would be like, no, you're not. You're not picking me up. I'm calling the police. Bye. Like, I don't know what, the whole, like, mindset of several of these people is just wild. So a friend of Melinda came over to Melinda's house, because they had went back to Melinda's house, I guess, and they told her all about what had happened. So then this girl, whose name is Crystal, gets in the car after being told that they just murdered somebody. I would not be getting in this car with you people. I would be like, no, you're gonna murder me. I'm a little paranoid though. So the three girls then go to pick up Amanda, who, again, why are all of you people getting in this car with these other people who are literally like, hey, we just murdered someone and set her on fire, and you guys are like, let's go to the mall? Or, like, what are you doing? I don't understand. So anyway, they then tell Amanda the full story in detail, and apparently both Amanda and Crystal were super reluctant to believe them until Lori popped the trunk and showed them the trunk that still had bloody handprints and socks in the trunk. Amanda, who was like the first person that's had any kind of normal reaction in this entire case, was horrified and asked to be taken home. And when they pulled up in front of her house, Melinda leaped over the seat and started kissing her, telling her that she loved her and pleaded with her to not tell anyone. Amanda promised that she would not tell anyone before she went in her house, which I would say about anything to get out of a car with people that had just killed someone and were like, "Ah, look at this sausage that looks like her body." I'd be like, I need to get out of here. Goodbye. So later in the morning of January 11th, 1992, so later that morning, which was January 11th of 1992, two brothers, Don and Ralph Foley, were driving towards Jefferson to go hunting when they noticed a body on the side of the road. They initially thought it was a mannequin, which, guys, it's like never a mannequin. The amount of people that always think a body is a mannequin, it's almost never a mannequin. But upon exiting the vehicle, they realized it was clearly the body of a child, because, again, she was 12. They called the police at 10:55 a.m. and were asked to return to the corpse so the police could meet them there. State Trooper David Cam and Jefferson County Sheriff Buck Shipley and other homicide detectives began an investigation, creating a crime scene, and collecting forensic evidence. They initially suspected it was a drug deal gone wrong and did not believe the crime had been committed by locals. Again, though, the two men that found her were able to immediately identify her as a child, so it's weird to me that the police are like, yeah, this is a drug deal. This child's a drug dealer. Anyway, it is important to note that the murderers had intentionally posed her body in a very suggestive position, apparently. So the cops immediately took that as that this was done on purpose and with intention. It was also found that Shanda's hands and face had been burnt off in an attempt to keep her basically like unidentifiable. She was found in a stance with her arms outstretched and clenched fists, which are obviously signs of being burned to death, how your muscles contract. Meanwhile, around the time that her body was being discovered, her father noticed that she was nowhere to be found, and had spent the morning calling neighbors and friends, and finally called his ex-wife, Shanda's mother, at 1:45 p.m., and they met and filed a missing persons report with the Clark County Sheriff's Office. So because they, were not super smart and had told everyone what they were doing and where they were going and with who and all of that, later that evening at around 8 p.m., the sheriff had contacted these girls and their parents and stuff, and said that they needed to be brought in for questioning. And so at 8 o'clock, Tony and Hope went to the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office with their parents, and they both gave very, kind of incoherent, rambling statements. But they did identify the victim as Shanda and named the two other girls involved, and described all of the events that had occurred. Homicide detectives were able to obtain dental records that did identify Shanda as the victim, because again, they couldn't identify her any other way because her face had been burned off. Melinda and Lori were arrested on January 12th, and the majority of the evidence for the arrest warrant came from the statements that were made by Tony and Hope. The prosecution immediately declared its intention to try Melinda and Lori as adults. So I'm going to give some backstory on all of the girls, including the victim, just kind of not because it excuses anything, but just kind of what led to this point and what contributed to these psychotic actions. So Shanda was born in the Pineville Community Hospital in Pineville, Kentucky on June 6th, 1979 to Stephen and Jacqueline. After Shanda's parents divorced, her mom remarried and they moved to Louisville. And there she attended 5th and 6th grade, did cheerleading, volleyball, and softball. And then in June in 1991, her mom divorced again, and they moved to New Albany, where she started at Hazelwood Middle School, which is where she met Amanda. And then, after, because her parents didn't like the effect they were seeing, she was transferred to Our Lady of Perpetual Help School, which was a Catholic school in New Albany. So then for the perpetrators, Melinda Lovelace, which the last name, could that be more fitting, honestly, was born in New Albany, Indiana on the 28th of October, 1975, the youngest of 3 daughters to Marjorie and Larry Lovelace. Larry was drafted into the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War and reached the rank of sergeant. And though he came home with what we would now know as PTSD, he was treated as a hero. But his wife, Marjorie, later described him as a sexual deviant who would wear her and her daughter's underwear and makeup, was incapable of staying monogamous, and had a mixture of jealousy and fascination with watching her have sex with other men and women. So overall, dude was a pervert and abusive. And stay away from men named Larry, because so many of these stories have a Larry who's just a deviant. So anyway, in 1965, Larry became an officer with the New Albany Police Department, which again, I know the psychology behind it is often because they're on power trips and they are sadistic and enjoy the power over people, but my gosh, the amount of these people that want to become police is just really makes you side-eye the police. He was fired after 8 months when he and his partner assaulted a black man who Larry had accused of sleeping with his wife. But again, A, I don't even know if that's true. But B, from everything I saw in the court records, Larry had been into watching men sleep with his wife. So I'm not sure why this guy was a problem, but anyway. And in 1988, he briefly worked as a mail carrier, but quit after 3 months, having brought home most of the mail to destroy it. So if you didn't get your mail in 1988 in southern Indiana, this pervert probably had it. So yeah, I mean, when both of the parents were working, Melinda's family was financially well off. But again, Larry, who was violent and abusive, did not usually contribute income to the family and mostly spent any money that he did make on himself buying guns, motorcycles, and cars, because that's what a pervert needs, is a gun. And he filed for bankruptcy in 1980. So they often describe the marriage as just kind of a mess, a train wreck, and that the daughters were often hungry, apparently not getting enough food. So while they were starving their kids, they would go off into bars in Louisville where Larry would pretend to be a doctor and introduce Marjorie as his girlfriend. He would basically go around the bar asking if any of the men wanted to sleep with her. So, and apparently this gets kind of weird and just comes out of nowhere, but during an orgy with another couple, Marjorie just tried to kill herself. I don't know. Apparently she had tried several times to kill herself. And it just gets even darker because then when Melinda was 9, Larry arranged for Marjorie to be gang raped, after which she tried to drown herself in the bathtub. And then she refused to sleep with him. So after months of that, he raped her. An event that the daughters testified to being able to hear through the closed doors. And then in the summer of 1986, Larry beat Marjorie so badly that she was hospitalized, and he was finally convicted of battery. All 3 of the girls testified that he had molested them at various points. Marjorie, so his wife's younger sister, testified that he had molested her, and also supposedly he had molested his daughter's cousin, so it would have been his nephew, from the age of 10 to 14. So, he's just going around raping everybody and just being an overall disgusting piece of shit named Larry. So, just basically a lot of abuse in Melinda's past. I'm not even going to go into more of it. There's so much more that it's really bad stuff. I guess one little fact I'll throw in is they even had Melinda taken to a hotel to be exorcised, as in she was possessed, and they left her in a room with a 50-year-old man while he did a 5-hour exorcism. And I don't even want to know. So this girl's been through it. Doesn't excuse it, obviously, but when your foundation is set up like this, I feel like the odds of you coming out totally normal are slim to none. So, little light at the end of the tunnel is that Larry is dead. He was killed in a car accident in St. Louis, Missouri on December 16th of 1998. So there's that little thing. So Lori was born in Madison, Indiana on October 5th, 1974. Her mother was a fundamentalist Pentecostal Christian, and her father was a factory worker that had 2 felony convictions. Lori claimed that she was molested as a child And in May of 1989, her mother discovered that Lori was changing from dresses, which, the Pentecostal church wears, into jeans at school. And after a confrontation, her mother beat her and attempted to strangle her for not wearing the dress, which that's wild to me that the religion's like, you can't wear pants, but you can beat and strangle your children. That's fine. Just make sure you're wearing a dress while you're strangling them. And so after a confrontation that night, social workers became involved, and Lori's parents agreed to visits to ensure that the child abuse was not occurring. So Lori became increasingly rebellious after her 15th birthday. She would often attempt to pretend to be possessed by the spirit she called the vampire. She began to engage in self-harm. And her parents discovered the self-harm and checked her into a mental hospital. And she was prescribed an antidepressant and released. She then tried to kill herself 2 days later. Was admitted to the hospital again and diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which I will say that does not come from nothing. Borderline personality disorder is often now thought of as a severe trauma response, and it's not just like an inherited condition. It is from a severe abuse. So she also announced that she had been having hallucinations since she was very young. She was discharged from the hospital in April and dropped out of high school for good in September of 1991. So Hope was born in Madison, Indiana on June 6, 1976. Court documents did not have as much about her background. I don't know if it's because there wasn't as much severe abuse or if it's because she wasn't as involved. She was, but not as involved as Lori and Melinda, so they didn't cover her as much. But her father was an engineer at a power plant. Her mom was a stay-at-home mom, and her parents divorced in February of 1984, and she moved in with her mother and siblings, and they moved to Quincy, Michigan for 3 years. And she claimed that she hated living in Michigan and it was turbulent. Her parents got back together and moved back to Madison in 1987, where she was reunited with her friends Lori and Tony, whom she had known since childhood. But her parents did not like her being friends with Lori, as they saw her as a bad influence, which, they were not wrong. And then Hope, shortly after moving back to Madison, began to self-harm. Not sure why, but she did. And then Tony was born in Madison, Indiana, on February 14th, 1976. Her father was a boilermaker, and she was close friends with Hope from childhood. She was molested and abused as well by a relative, and then was raped at 14 by a local teenage boy. And the police did nothing except issue a restraining order for the boy to stay away, but he didn't face any kind of criminal charges. She began going to counseling after the rape incident, but did not continue, and then started acting out and became, quote, promiscuous. Began to self-harm and attempted to kill herself in 8th grade. Which, the thing about her becoming promiscuous is that's often what women that have been sexually abused do. Men externalize and women internalize. So she starts acting out and harming herself rather than others. So just to kind of go over the timeline again. The actual crime occurred in the early morning hours of January 11th, 1992, and her body was discovered in the morning, early afternoon of January 11th. And then Lori and Melinda were arrested January 12th, so the next day. I couldn't find a clear answer of exactly when. And again, Hope and Tony had been arrested the evening of January 11th when they went to be interviewed and confessed. All of them were charged as adults, so to avoid the death penalty, they accepted plea bargains. Since some of them had troubling home lives with claims of sexual and physical abuse, there were mitigating factors for the court. And Lori had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and had hallucinations. Lori and Melinda were sentenced to 60 years in the Indiana Women's Prison in Indianapolis. And however, despite that, none of them served 60 years. Lori was released in January of 2018, served probation for 1 year. So as of mid-2019, she was just completely free, which is... I live in Indianapolis, so I don't know how I feel about that. Melinda, who was the ringleader, was released in September of 2019. Again, I don't know how I feel about that. This seems, for what they did to her and the fact that she was alive in the trunk for hours and was just being stabbed and assaulted and stabbed and assaulted, like, this doesn't seem like long enough. They served half their sentences. Hope was sentenced to 60 years with 10 years suspended for mitigating circumstances, plus 10 years of probation. But on appeal, a judge reduced the sentence to a total of 35 years. So, and in exchange for Tony's cooperation, she was allowed to plead guilty to 1 count of criminal confinement and sentenced to a maximum of 20 years. Which seems crazy to me is Tony participated the least, and she was the one who didn't want to look at her body and didn't want to be involved after a certain point. But yet, she got 20 years, but then the ones who actually, did the murder and were, taunting her got, 30 to 60 years. I don't know. It just, the main ringleaders, I don't feel like 60 years is enough. I feel like that's, a life thing. I don't care if they were teenagers. The stuff they did was not just a whoops, we killed her. It's they're into it. Anyway. So, Melinda immediately appealed her sentence, but it was upheld by the Indiana Supreme Court in 1994. And in 2007, Melinda's attorney sought post-conviction relief from the court that had originally sentenced her and argued that Melinda had been, quote, profoundly retarded by childhood abuse, and argued that she had not been represented competently by counsel, which caused her to accept a plea bargain because they had told her that, basically she was going to get the death penalty. So he's saying, they scared her into taking a plea bargain. He also argued that she was 16 and was too young to enter into a contract with the state without consent from a parent. But I'm I feel like at that point, she wasn't too young to commit heinous murder. So I think she can sign a contract. I don't know. So, but on January 8th, 2008, her request was rejected by the Jefferson Circuit Court, and she would not be eligible for parole for 15 more years, thus maintaining the original guilty plea. So then she appealed that, and in November of 2008, she was again rejected by the Indiana Court of Appeals. So, moving on to Tony, after serving only 9 years, she was released December 14th, 2000. She remained on parole until December of 2002. And in April of 2006, Hope was released from the Indiana Women's Prison on parole after serving 14 years of her original sentence, which she's one that I definitely feel like should have gotten more, because she's the one that sprayed her with Windex and was like, you're not so hot now, after, she'd been stabbed and repeatedly and sexually assaulted with a tire iron and stuff. She remained on parole for 5 years till April of 2011. Lori was released from the Rockville Correctional Facility on January 11th, 2018, which was exactly the 26th anniversary of Shanda's death. She had served only 26 years and completed an additional year of parole. And she, in my opinion, she may have not been the ringleader in terms of being the mastermind, but she seemed to really be reveling in it. So for her to have only served 26 years for killing a 12-year-old in a super horrific way, seems not enough to me. So Melinda, who was named the ringleader, was released from the Indiana Women's Prison on September 5th, 2019, after serving 26 years. She is currently on parole in Kentucky. Again, considering this was her whole idea, 26 years for what they did seems, I mean, I know what she's been through, but my gosh, you killed a 12-year-old and sexually assaulted her, and that just, I don't know. So, sadly, Shanda's father, Stephen, died of alcoholism in 2005 at the age of 53. And in an interview with Shanda's mother, Jacqueline, on the investigative discovery series Deadly Women, she stated that Shanda's father had been so distraught by his daughter's murder that he, quote, did everything he could to kill himself besides put a gun to his head, and that he, quote, drank himself to death. The man definitely died from a broken heart. There was a scholarship fund started in Shanda's name in January of 2009 called the Shanda Scholarship Fund, which provides scholarships to 2 students a year in New Albany. But unfortunately, in November of 2018, so only 9 years later, Shanda's mother announced that the scholarship fund had been completely depleted. So that is the very twisted and disturbing case of Shanda Sharer, who went through absolutely horrific things at only 12 years old. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed that the best that you can, and hope you keep listening.